Hello everybody and welcome back. Today I speak a little bit about the sprite sheet tutorial. I go a little bit deeper what the code is doing. So let's start from the beginning. You have here the two lines. You don't have to know so much about it. It's just if you want to work with the ROM disk, these two lines are for using ROM disk. So we don't change anything about this because we're using ROM disk. Depends on which editor you have. The file here looks a little bit different. You see I can open and close here the function and the structures, but in the end it's the same file. We have here some structure of the header. You have it here for the texture header, the color palette header, the sprite have a structure, and the sprite sheet here have a structure. Here you don't have to change anything, just leave the code like it is. This here is the first part that's getting interested. Like I told you, here is the structure of the sprite sheet. That means not that you already have a sprite sheet you can use. This is a plan how a sprite sheet should look. And this is the point where I tell the system I need a sprite sheet with this name. He used stage 1 actor sheet and user interface sheet. For example, if you want to have in the future a sprite sheet, it's called player because all the graphic data of your players there. We just player sheet. You can use nearly every name. There are some rules about names you can use, but you don't have to make it player underbar sheet. It's just a good style because every time in the code when there's player underbar sheet, I know exactly, it's a sprite sheet, and the name player tells you, okay, perhaps the data of the players inside the sheet. So in the future, every time you want to make a completely new sprite sheet, you have to write here the name of the sprite sheet. Next function is the sprite sheet load function. A function always have a return value. In this case, it's an integer and some arguments. That's the input of the function. And if you're using a function that you haven't wrote by yourself, the most important thing is return value. In a lot of cases, the return value is not important for your code. It's just information for the error handling. What is important is the value you put in the option. So in this case, it want to have a sprite sheet, the name of the texture file, the name of the palette file, and the name of the text file. The stuff that he's doing here, he's preparing to open the files, checking if everything is okay with the files, and then read the data of the files. That's it. Next function is the sprite sheet free. Every time you don't need a sprite sheet anymore, you have to give the RAM space back. The next function is a initialization. I come later to the init. Next one is the setup palette, and it's doing exactly what it's written there. Set up the palette. What's exactly doing inside this function, it's not so interesting at the moment. So let's go to the main function. The main function is the function when you start the program. So what the program is doing here, first it calls the init function. So let's look into the init function. When you're using some part of the Dreamcast, in the most cases you have to make an initialization. That's something like telling the system, I need the graphic chip, or hello, I need the sound system, something like this. First of all, we make an initialization of the graphic chip and give him some information. So leave it everything like it is, it will work. PVR set background color sets the background color. Next function is loading the sprite sheet. If you want to load your own sprite sheet, like we said, player, it have to look like this. Here the program loads all the data and checks if everything was okay. So in our case, we just copy everything. And here again, we have the player. Not the layer texture. And the data in the ROM disk then also is player sheet. And player sheet for the palette and for the text file. So you have to change it, edit here your data for your new sprite sheet. That's all you have to know about the init. So let's see what the program is doing next. This is an endless loop, and inside this loop, the program calls the draw function. Here it's getting a little bit more interesting. First of all, there's PVR wait ready. Tells the program just wait until the PVR is ready. Next one sets the beginning of our scene. Every beginning, you can see, have a scene finish here. Everything you want to draw, you have to write between PVR screen finish and PVR screen begin. Next, you need PVR list begin. What does it exactly mean? Doesn't matter. Just you need this line. So next one sets up the palette, so the program knows which palette color he used for what texture. So in our case, we copy this here. Player palette, make it number 2. After you set the setup palette, you can start with the drawing. The program is doing here a lot of stuff. Especially here it's getting a little bit complicated because he uses a number between 0 and 7 and adds this number at the end of the name mage combat to create a name and something like this. I don't go deeper into this now. We just look how to draw a single sprite. And you see here you call the function draw sprite. The first argument is the sheet. Next one you have to enter the name of the sprite. So you remember when you look at the right side here that our sprite sheet is generated of all these sprites. And the sprite sheet still know the name of every sprite. So here you can write combat 0, combat 1 or combat 2. Depends which sprite you want to have. The next two arguments are the X and the Y points on the screen where you want to set it. So 0, 0 is left down and depends on your resolution. 640 to 480 is upper right. And the last one is your color palette. So the last thing we're doing is looking a little bit deeper into the drawing sprite function. The interesting part comes here. The Dreamcast uses a rectangle defined by 4 points. So you have here x0, x1, y0, y1. And that's the definition of the rectangle. That's here. You can see it here. And on this rectangle, you put the sprite. The sprite is the texture. Here you set how to place the texture on the rectangle. The rest of the function is at the moment not so important for us. There's some stuff you can do here if you want to make rotation of the sprite. But at the moment, we don't do anything here. So that's all for now. In the next video, I will clean up the complete tutorial a little bit. That means I delete everything what we don't need and change a few things and put away some stuff so that we have a clear main function or a clear draw function where we can work with. So thank you for watching this video and see you next time.